Welcome to the Social Justice Speaker Series, sponsored by the Department of Sociology and Criminal Justice. We appreciate all of you being in attendance. We appreciate you all coming out this afternoon. The Social Justice Speaker Series was created by the Department of Sociology and Criminal Justice around 2003 to really begin to have a dialogue about what it means to be free. What are human rights? What does it mean to have justice? What does it mean to live in society in peace? And so within that particular thematic, every year we try to invite nationally and internationally recognized speakers to participate in the ongoing dialogue about what it means to be free, what it means to live in a just and democratic society, and what's the role of all of us in making sure that vision actually comes to fruition. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak with you today. I hope you enjoy the event. I hope you're able to engage and learn something from it. And thank you for being here. Have a good afternoon.
Hello, welcome everyone. My name is David Burley. I'm an environmental sociologist here in the Sociology Criminal Justice Department. And we have a very special speaker here today that I would like to welcome. Her name is Derricka Purnell. I'll just give you a few short statements about who she is and what she does. She's the author of the widely praised book, Becoming Abolitionist, Police, Protest, and the Pursuit of Freedom. She details in the book how multiracial social movements rooted in rebellion, risk-taking, and revolutionary love have pushed her and a generation of activists towards the cause of police abolition. The book travels across geography and time and offers lessons that activists have learned from Ferguson to South Africa, from Reconstruction to contemporary protests against police shootings. Purnell received her JD from Harvard Law School, her BA from the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and studied public policy and economics at the University of California, Berkeley, as a public policy and international affairs law fellow. Her writing has been published widely, including the Oxford Handbook of Race and Law in the United States, the Harvard Journal of African American Policy, the New York Times, the Atlantic, the New York Magazine, and Boston Review, Teen Vogue, and Harper's Bazaar. She has lectured, studied, and strategized around social movements across the United States, the Netherlands, Belgium, South Africa, United Kingdom, and Australia. She is currently a columnist at The Guardian and a scholar in residence at Columbia Law School. Pretty impressive. Maybe she could come here and teach your class. All right, I take that class. Anyway, please give a warm welcome to Derricka Purnell. And thank you for coming.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. It's very cold where I live right now. So that you guys are inside is blowing my mind right now. And you're choosing to be here in the auditorium listening to me in this conversation means a lot. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. So we were just in the back talking about climate change, Stranger Things, so we're just going to continue the conversation, right? One of the students submitted a lot of questions, and we have student groups here that do a lot of justice-oriented work and activist work on campus here. We got the Reconnect group, that's this environmental sustainability organization on campus. We got the Sociology Club here and a bunch of other clubs. Going back to what you were, they had a lot of questions about how to get things done and how to build a team. All right, but I want to first, before we address those things, go back to
what your ideas are about abolition. And I think you talked about some things in your view about the police being the only available tool to use.
Yeah. Yes, of course. So one thing I try to say and just be honest in how we develop our conceptions of police, of prisons, of the entire criminal legal system. It's the same way we develop those ideas about anything in the world. Like no one's born with ideas about what's just, what's unjust. Like our society, our families, our churches, like they create us, they help inform and influence our ideas, our experiences. And so what I try to be honest about in the book, and what I try to say is that when I was born, didn't have any ideas about police. Like these things were forged through those experiences and through those institutions. And so early on, I had different kinds of interactions with police. Like in one sense, the police were people who would come to my mom's house because she had a couple of friends who were in the police department, right? And they worked in the police department because at the high school, they didn't have the options or the support to think about the kinds of careers that they could pursue. So the police department, sort of like the military, was a job that was always hiring. And they were always recruiting at our high schools, right? So building up, of course, a lot of times people would be recruited on neighborhoods. And so sometimes I saw them as my mom's friends. Sometimes I would see them at school through like a books and gadgets program. They would show us their guns when we were in fifth grade. Like, this is weird, but I guess, this is normal. We have teachers, we have postal workers, we have cops. Like this is sort of the society that we have. And then, especially as I, started to age maybe third or fourth grade, the police also were a definite sign of violence. And they're the people who separated families, people who arrested a lot of the kids that I liked, a lot of my crushes. They were the people who, would search our backpacks and our book bags and have to pull up our ankles, pull up our pants, triangles to go to school. And I'm like, well, who is this for? Because, they're making me feel unsafe. I'm not sure what they're saying they're protecting me from, but I sort of feel unsafe. And then, as time went on, at least when I was growing up, I would hear bits and pieces of stories of spectacular acts of police violence. So I would hear about beating, I would hear about raid, I would hear about this person happened, this person got shot. And I would be like, oh, okay, maybe the police are just trying to keep our neighborhood safe and this sort of consequence. And then I think in 2006, I heard about the story of Sean Bell. And so there used to be this social media website called Facebook. Y'all know Facebook? Because now kids are like TikToking. And I'm like, oh my gosh. When I think of TikTok, I think of Kesha, because she had a song called TikTok. Y'all know Kesha? I don't know. Y'all know Kesha because y'all are so young. But there used to be this social media site called Facebook that was relevant when I was in school, when I was in high school. And way back, when we got born, like 2000. Oh, okay, we got 2002 right here, 2003, 2003, 2004, okay, great. Yes, so when you guys were being born, I was on this site called Facebook. And back in the day, there used to be this feature where you create a status. And your status was confined by this verb is. So you would have to say Derricka is, and you would have to fill it out. And there was a limit, it was a very strange time. And one of the ways I found out about this killing was on Yahoo News, because for Twitter, Yahoo was a major news source. And I remember learning about this young black guy in New York City the night before his wedding, at his bachelor party, and a group of cops surrounded his car and just unloaded rounds of bullets into his car. And I remember, again, this is 2005, 2006, just being shocked and devastated that this group of black guys who were celebrating supposed to be one of the most joyous occasions of his life, are now, being shot at, and one gets killed, Sean Bell. And I remember there were marches, there were protests, there were calls to get the police who killed Sean arrested and not convicted, but they ended up not going to jail. And I was so angry that I wrote this note about it on Facebook. So it felt like the only way at the time that I could sort of express what I felt. And so I thought Sean Bell was an anomaly that police killed people in the way that they did. And sadly, it wasn't until 2014 when Michael Brown was killed like 5 minutes from my house in St. Louis by a Ferguson Police Department officer that the public started to ask questions like, wait, what's going on? Eric Garner gets killed in New York City, Michael Brown gets killed in Ferguson, his body is left on the ground for 4 hours uncovered in an August sun. You know, school hasn't started back. Their kids who are playing outside, their elders are on their porches and are watching this little black boy bleed out, right? And so then the Washington Post and the Guardian, they started keeping track of police killings because there's no law, nothing requires police to keep track of their killings. And then when the statistic came out, these media reports that police kill about 3 people a day, you know, and even right now in 2022, police are on track to kill more people than they had been in 2014. I think it was a shock to a lot of us who had grown up with different relationships and different encounters with police that, oh, this isn't just like one anomalous situation what happened in China. No, but there's a much broader systemic issue with policing. We should figure out how to address that.
You know, and it's interesting, right? Because, of course, social media, just the progression of our society and democratic values all play into it. But those shootings have always been going on. We just didn't know about them. They didn't blow up like the way they have now, right? So, you know, it's interesting what you said about how, you know, as a little kid, you know, your perception of the police, you know, and I'd like to read a question from a student that is along those same lines, right? And that's the wrong page. But what she says is, this is a student from my social problems class. She says, so many of the ideas for reform that you mentioned in your interview sound as though they may be hard to implement for the adults in our society. For example, little boys and girls often look up to and admire policemen and policewomen because they are so often depicted as heroes in the media. This admiration often evolves into respect for police once these children grow older. If the degree to which one is racist or not racist as an adult reflects the ideals modeled to him or her throughout childhood, then what may be some ways we can begin to make changes for the children in our society?
What a powerful question. So, what was this? In September, I was invited to this, I don't know what it was weird. It was interesting, but it was weird. It was like a gathering of people who work in Hollywood, who work shows for Hollywood. I tend to not do stuff like this, but one of my friends was going, she's like, Derricka, I think this would be a great opportunity for you to talk to all these people who create shows on Netflix and on Hulu and Amazon Prime, all the streaming things that people steal my passwords for, right? This is you know, that audience. And so when someone asked me, I can't remember the question, but someone asked me, you know, what's something that I would hope to leave for the room to consider? And funny enough, I talked about Stranger Things. Because do y'all like Stranger Things? Do y'all know Stranger Things? Yeah. No? I
Greatest show ever.
One of the greatest shows ever. And so I have 2 kids, I have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old. The 8-year-old and I, we watch Stranger Things together, we talk about the episode, and he knows my line of work, he knows what I do, he knows my lawyering, and we talk about all kinds of stuff, politics, abolition, all this stuff. And so one day he asked me, he said, why is Hopper a police officer? And Hopper is like the small-time cop on the show. He's like defending, the community, the town, to Russians, to alien invaders, to like people who don't work like other souls. And so I was debating, telling him the truth. I was like, I don't want to get into a conversation about like masculinity in small-town Indiana and how that's like a trope of like a whatever. But I just explained. I said, well, sometimes in shows, the writers, their creativity is so confined to how we think about who the heroes are in real life. And it's easy to, make Hopper the hero, but he has a gun, and all this other stuff. And Juice on Kid, he goes, well, I thought the mom was the hero. Like, isn't mom the hero of that story? And he starts talking about, why he sees her as the most important person in the show. And I said, no, you're right. I think Joyce Byers is a hero. Like, she's like fighting for her kid. She's looking for him. And it's the relationship between Joyce Byers and Hopper is very interesting too, because in real life, Joyce Byers is a poor white woman who lives much further than all the other middle class kids, all of his friends. If you notice, the reason why Will goes missing is because he's over at Mike's house. Now I'm like just spoiling the show, but it's okay. You haven't seen this part, shame. So they're at Mike's house, right? And what are they playing? Dungeons and Dragons in his basement. And as you see when they go home, Mike gets to stay home. He has like a nice nuclear family. And then they started they started fighting. One kid peels off, goes home, another kid peels off. But who takes the longest to go home? Will. That's a class analysis. Like, why does he live on the outskirts of this town, right? And when she starts saying, my son is missing, I can hear him talking through the walls. In real life, she would have been arrested. She would have been institutionalized, right? She would have been probably charged with negligence. And so even how they depict the relationship, they made Joyce Byers, like this poor white woman, is this cop like Paris and trying to fight. But that's not how it works in reality. That's not how the relationship between people work with police most of the time. And so this conversation on Stranger Things just opened up not only just the depiction of the cop, but it's like the relationships of how these police and how they interact with the people. And so I do think that's part of it. I know because it was just Halloween the other day, and what happens? I get little kids who are trying to dress up as SWAT, and it's like, what SWAT does? It's so violent and so sad, but it's like we put these costumes on our children. It's like something logical. It's like, well, mostly what SWAT does is like kick down doors of people who are black and brown and poor. They do raids on people who are immigrants. Like, this is what they do. But then you get a movie with Colin Farrell, and it seems interesting because it's a bank robbery, right? And so, yeah, I think that it's going to take a lot of intentionality to be more creative in how we're depicting and telling stories of not only the actual relationships of what people have in society, but also what could be. And I think adults have to pay more attention too, because it wasn't until my kid asked that question that I realized, like, oh yeah, I didn't pay attention really to like the class divisions that took place in that show until we started to back. Yes, exactly.
That's so interesting, right? Yeah, kids have a lot of insight sometimes.
Yes, especially mine, because he's an Aquarius, and so he got all Aquarius energy, yes.
All right, so that brings up a lot of questions. One is, were the Hollywood creative types, were they open and seeking, more nuanced ways to represent law enforcement, masculinity, those sorts of things? But maybe the more important question right now is, and to play devil's advocate, okay, I'm sure you get this question every day of your life, right? They're kicking in the doors, SWAT's kicking in the doors of people because they're committing crimes. They're a danger to their community. They're a danger to their family. They're a danger to society. What do you want to do? Let everybody out of jail and have no police, right? So what do you?
No, you're absolutely right. The first thing I say is, and this is, I'm telling this to y'all, I don't tell this to people, most people, but you know how much cocaine I've seen at Harvard Law School?
Kids at Harvard do not do cocaine, Derricka.
Well, it's in all the presidential memoirs. And so Barack Obama, George Bush, they all say, oh, Yale, Harvard, it's a place where you go to do cocaine. It's the pipeline program. And so they write about it in their memoirs, and people are like, oh, those those college kids, that's what you do. Have you ever heard of a raid at Harvard? Have you ever heard of a raid at Yale?
And we've all heard about when Bush was president, the Skull and Bones
Yes,
fraternity at Yale.
Yeah, so the amount of violence and drugs and all the things that we penalize. There's a really interesting book that I read when I was in college. I think it's called Normal Drug Dealers. But it's basically about the amount of drugs that get passed through universities. And what happens in universities, not here. I know you guys know drugs. And no one, do you even know what drugs are? No, exactly. So no one knows drugs. But every other campus across America, kids are, doing drugs, all kinds of drugs, all kinds of drugs. And so what happens is then it becomes criminal when it goes across certain racial lines, class lines, gender lines, right? That's why I think this summer I spent a month in Portugal. And Portugal has essentially decriminalized all drugs. And you don't have crime there because it's not against the law. Like, it's not against the law to use drugs. And what happened, there's been tremendous research about how it's safer to use drugs there. The culture is different, it's not taboo. People are able to test their drugs and make sure that they're healthy. So young people, their relationship to drugs and alcohol is just completely different than like the bad guys who are using drugs in the United States in the ghettos, right? And so the context of what it means to be a criminal, to break the law, really depends on what is the law and who gets to write the law. And I say this all the time, there are people in Congress who are fighting to pass drug laws and drug tests for people who receive welfare benefits, right? And I bet you, no one in Congress is going to take a drug test. No one in Congress, they're not going to do that to police themselves. And the more, because I've been a student working on this for so long, I've had so many different kinds of jobs. I was the first person in my family to go to college. And so when I was in college, I was working internships, I was driving kids to practices and one of my mentors, I was babysitting, I was teaching dance class, I was doing so much. And I remember having to okay, I have to make time to get a drug test for this new job. I have to make sure I find food to eat because once I go to work, I'm not going to be able to afford what's there. And once I became a lawyer, I realized oh yeah, the policies that people fight for to punish and criminalize other people, they don't exist among lawyers. Like now, any day I can go into my office and get free food that's there. But it wasn't the case when I was hungry when I was a college student, when I was growing up. And so the more you have, really the more that you get. And so to your second point about, do we just let all the criminals out? Like, do we just let, first I would say all the criminals are not even in it. Like, they're not even in it. More people are not even in it than letting all the people out. And I want to paint a really quick picture about who's in. There are about 10 million arrests every year in the United States. Like, police arrest 10 million people, there's about 1 million cops, 18,000 law enforcement agencies. The people get arrested are people who are poor. And I don't mean just poor, I mean really poor. If you have had more than one arrest, in a year period, there's a 65% chance that your income is $10,000 or less. $10,000 or less. People are living $2 to $5 a day. That's people. People get arrested for all kinds of things that shouldn't even be illegal in the first place. So do I think we should let those people out? Absolutely. Do I think that we should create a society where people don't break the law? Absolutely. But do I think that the law is completely unjust? Absolutely, right? So that's sort of what I try to paint a picture. Abolitionists, at least the tradition I come from, are also not asking for the complete dismantling of 4,000 jails overnight. It's not realistic. That's not what's going to happen. But what we can do right now is start laying the foundation to shrink our carceral system. And that should even go anyway. We should want less crime. We have more jails and more people incarcerated anywhere else in the world. And yet our crime rate is through the roof. So we're not going to incarcerate or police our way out of people harming each other. And so how can we decriminalize and decarcerate and depolice, start shifting our carceral landscape so we're not relying on those as solutions to social problems? And that's going to be a long-term process.
Okay, so you're not saying we should get rid of police and prisons tomorrow.
I'm saying it's not going to happen. I'm saying that, like I said, there's 4,000 jails and prisons. There's more jails and prisons. There's what I just looked at the other day? I think there are 6,000 colleges and 4,000 jails and prisons in the United States.
I think the U.S. Incarcerates more people than any other country on earth, and that includes places like Syria, Iraq, right? Some of these places that we consider.
They 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's prison population.
Yeah. And on top of that, get ready, we're number one, folks. We're number one. Louisiana is the tops in the U.S., right, for incarcerating people. In many poor communities, prisons and police forces are some of the only jobs that are available.
Yeah.
I don't know. Can we create better types of jobs? Can we have different forms of better type of economic development?
Yeah, no, I would hope so. I would hope so. When I hear Mayor Lori Lightfoot of Chicago, who really gets on my nerves, but when I heard her say this, my mouth just dropped open. She was pushing back on people who were saying, defund the police, defund the police. And her response was that, well, if we defund the police, all this terrible stuff would happen, right? Her number one response was, so wait, you want to defund the only way that Black and Latino people can enter the middle class? That was her concern. So it's so sad that police gets used, prisons too, gets used as a jobs program to manage people who are poor or Black and brown or undocumented, right? That's what happens. I mean, look at throughout the history of society. For every progressive fight that we've seen from, voting rights for Black people, voting rights for women, and now, the fight for reproductive justice, who are the police facing during those protests? And they're not protecting those rights, they're protecting the law, even when the law is bad. And so it's sad that a lot of working class communities get exploited through recruitment, right, as a way to build up this system that then manages inequality for the rest of us. Well, how about we spend time actually getting to the root of the inequality rather than punishing people for it? And some people say, Derricka, I'm not sure. There are always going to be bad people. People are just evil. I know people because people are just bad. There's always going to be people who are bad. Well, our jails and prisons are not primarily holding people who are just bad. They're holding people who have been in situations who have committed harm, not denying harm, not denying murder, not denying sexual violence. But the reasons why people kill people, the reasons why people sexually assault each other are so preventable in 95% of the cases. It's rarely the case that someone's just sick or just evil. When we use words like sick and evil, it takes the pressure off of us to actually ask, why did this person kill this person? Right? Because if it's the case that people are just sick and evil, are they just sick and evil in the United States? Because we hold the most, are we just a sick and evil country? It's oh no, well you can't, America can't be sick and evil, we're great. We're gonna help everyone else in the world. So if it's not that our people are just born naturally born sick and born evil, well, why is there's more people being more penalized, more punished, more incarcerated here than anyone else? Now, what are the social conditions that make that possible? So in the book, that's why I take on murder, that's why I take on sexual violence head on, because it's not as simple as, well, what do we do about the murderers? Well, there are 15,000 homicides in the U.S. every year. How do we get to 7? How do we get to 5,000? How do we get to 3,000? How do we get to 2,000? And then if the 500 people left kill people, well, let's figure out what to do with those people. But we're not going to solve that by, the 15,000 people who died and lose their lives. Because police aren't even stopping that, right? So we spend trillions of dollars on police in the prisons, and we still have 15,000 homicides. And the police don't even arrest half of those people. And the people who then get arrested don't even get convicted. And the people who get convicted sometimes don't even get jail time.
And many times they arrest the wrong people. As we continually see, this person gets released because the DNA evidence proves otherwise, and that's so really has been often the case, right? And there's all sorts of reasons for that, right? The public wants to see results.
Absolutely.
Or DA offices feel the pressure to prosecute, right? To make the police officers and the departments feel pressure to arrest someone, right? And it's easier to, when people don't have the resources to fight back. Yeah. You talked about, sexual violence, murder, the kind of the big things that people worry about when you hear, when they hear about the possibility or someone thinking about police abolition. There's been a lot of talk in the last few years about how police don't actually prevent crime, right? And I think that's, that ties into all this, right? Because you're talking, well, what's going to happen, right? And can you dive into that a little bit, and how does this system really work? We have this perception that we need the police to prevent crime, but they don't prevent crime?
Yeah, I mean, if they did, it'd probably be many more lives saved than the 50,000 people I just talked about, right? And so it's no. Police are reactive, and you don't have to take my word for it. You can take the word from the police, right? Writing this book, I've read decades and decades and decades of police literature, of police studies, people who work in criminology, DOJ reports, reading, people trying to figure out how do we improve police, how do we improve police. And the reports across, since the 1960s up to present, what you see is a constant feature from people who are supportive of police to say, we are reactive. We aren't concerned with the social conditions, we are reactive. And if anything, people expect us to be more than just reactive, and we can't and we won't. We show up, we put someone in jail sometimes, we arrest people sometimes, but we can't prevent we can't do that. There's too many types of harms that exist for us to be to prevention. So that's why I include those studies and those reports in our book, because you have people who are police themselves, or who are trying to reform police, say this is not what the police do. The PR campaigns say otherwise, right? The public relations, the public facing campaigns say, crime prevention. We need more surveillance for more prevention. We need more money for more prevention, but that's not true. So we can look at what happened in the pandemic. There's been in a few different cities where people are, oh man, crime is spiking, crime is going up. Y'all talk about defund the police. We need to give more money to the police. It doesn't matter, people on all sides of the political spectrum who are fighting to get more money for the police. Money that came to the cities as a result of pandemic relief, a lot of that money went to police departments. I don't think people realize that. And a lot of police budgets did increase as a result of pandemic stimulus from the federal government. So police are getting more funding, more legitimacy, more credibility as crime is increasing. And so when crime is down, so we need to give more money to police just in case it goes back up. Crime is up, we need to give more money to police to fight it. Well, if there's so many police here, then why does this continue to happen?
Yeah.
And it's sad, it's so sad. I'm personally shocked that the minor crime waves that we've seen in different parts of the country is not actually higher. It should be higher. Do you know what people have gone through in the last 2 years? And we see in periods of economic uncertainty, like a pandemic or a recession, violence increases. People are stressed, people are hungry. So when organizers were demanding resources and health care, it's these were life-saving mechanisms and interventions that people were demanding instead of more carceral responses. So the amount of robust mutual aid that happened across the country, people coming together, checking on their neighbors, providing groceries, setting up ways for people to get their medicine, that I think actually kept crime even lower than what it should have been. Not police, who, if we remember the beginning part of the pandemic, were arresting people for not wearing masks. We're driving Black people off of buses in Philadelphia for not having on PPE. And we're in Central Park passing out masks to people to white people who didn't have them. So you see unequal enforcement under the pandemic and ask, why do people feel more unsafe? Why are people committing more harm? So police and incarceration, this whole carceral system is contributing to the further isolation, alienation, and deprivation of people in our communities. So how can we think of better ways to respond rather than just relying on carceral realities as our potential solutions?
Okay, all right, wow, gosh, there's a lot there, right? One of the things we there's been some exploration of having different types of responders to situations, right? Like not having the police be responsible for all societal ills, right? Like, okay, shouldn't police be dealing with the homeless? They're not trained to do that. Should the police be dealing with drug addiction and drug overdoses and drug problems, right? They're not trained to deal with that, right? They're, all these other things. And so we've seen places like Albuquerque, New Mexico, who, have a different, they have social workers, right, that respond to certain situations. What do you think about those things, and can they work? Do they work?
Yeah, I think people present them as an alternative to police, and I think that's important. I think that's we should figure out how to meet people where they are and give them the care and support that they need to thrive. I think that's so important. How can I say this? My nervousness is that people will then think that we can just replace a cop with this other system. And it's the goal is not to have better people trained to address the homeless. The ultimate goal is to eradicate homelessness. And that requires different kinds of policy commitments, different kinds of protests, different kinds of analyses, right? And just training people better to relate intervention. Which is why I say, police ultimately manage that inequality. If we look at who gets locked up, who ends up in prisons, who ends up spending a lot of time away, it's not even people who kill people. Why? I talk about the research in the book. It's not just that people kill them, but why do people kill people? And you see that, people kill people because there's, an argument. It's overwhelmingly men killing men. So it says it's a petty argument, and it escalates because someone feels disrespected, right? So we see patriarchy and toxic masculinity get in the way, and it escalates so much that someone takes another person's life. People are killing people in defensive and self-defense, and so I'm gonna get you before you get me, right? And it's sad. It's a sad reality. Unfortunately, it's also the policy of our U.S. government who literally preemptively drove people before they attacked the U.S. And so then you have those people who would defend that program and shake their fingers when people do on the interpersonal level, right? And I think abolitionists are asking, well, how do we stop both? How do we stop the violence of U.S. militarism from doing these preemptive drone strikes and try to stop people before they get them? And how do we also discourage people from initiating violence and figuring out other ways to keep them safe? And so I think it's great, sort of a non-reformist reform. Right? It's a reform that stops the expansion of the carceral state, tries to directly address the problem, but it's not a part of the long-term goal of ultimately eradicating homelessness, like I said. Then even with drug addiction, we talk about drug addiction, it's we just need good people to work in drug addiction. It's true. And I love this book by Victoria Law and Maya Schrenmore because it made me even think differently about why people use drugs. Again, not here, because people don't use drugs here. But it made me think differently about why people use drugs. How do addictions exist in the first place? Some of it's chemistry, some of it's science. A lot of it's social. People become drug dependent because they don't have access to good medicine. Right? They don't have access to the quality care. I see this a lot in my own family. It becomes a way of access and relief because you can't afford your prescription medicine, right? Or you're trying to deal with the realities of what it's like to be discriminated against at work. And so, all right, even as a lawyer, the law has one of the highest rates of alcoholism on all professions. And it's why a lot of lawyers are expected to be part of a culture where you work for 15 hours a day, you go home and drink your way. So the alcohol and drug dependency are not just these individual problems. So having someone better trained to then go away and help someone who's an addict or dealing with alcoholism, it doesn't get to the larger societal question of why do people become dependent upon these things. Yeah. And so Maya Schrenmore and Victoria Law's book, Prison by Any Other Name, does a really good job of addressing that, and some of Carl Hart's work around the use of drugs and how recreational drugs and drugs for healing can be quite liberatory and important, but because of criminalization, stigma, our society, they become these dirty words that are just problematic. And so I've really been pushed recently to think more expansively about why people turn to these things instead of thinking about Instead of just saying like, how do we train one person to be a better
Yeah.
person, a better response system, you know?
Yeah, so much. The gender, the toxic masculinity, the way our society and economy works, the pressure of, this work environment.
Production, yes.
Production.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so, a lot of people, we hear a lot of political leaders at the local, state, and national level, right? And they'll say, well, we don't need the abolition. There are a few bad apples in every department. We don't need to get rid of police. What we need is more police reform, more community policing, right? What are your thoughts about that?
So y'all, personally, I love apples, and I don't like that apples get a bad rap.
Right.
Because apples don't be killing people. I mean, if you choke on an apple, yes, you can probably die. But do y'all like candy apples? I love candy apples. I think apples are such a cool fruit. Like, I'm pro apple, and so I'm like, why is it just a few bad apples? So that's yeah. So sorry, I just put out my chest because I hear that a lot. And so I said, okay, let's take that seriously. That there are only a few bad apples. Are we counting the bad apples as cops who just kill people? Are those the bad apples? Okay, so that means that's just 1,000 cops, I guess, who kill people every year. So what about all the other apples, right? Who surveil people, who arrest homeless, even the nicest, friendliest, most diverse cop who says, hey, you can't sleep under this bridge. This is my third warning to you. I hate that I have to do this. I really wish, can you just please go somewhere else? And the person says, I have nowhere to go. I'm going to stay here. I'm tired. And that cop locks up that person. Is that cop a good apple or a bad apple? Unless it's legit.
Right?
Yeah, so what happens is that when we use the language of good apples and bad apples, it becomes about the individual benevolence of the person and not about the power they possess to inflict punishment.
Through the institution.
Exactly. So then it's like, well, let's say all the apples are great. They're just really, really great apples. But at the end of the day, the job, the power, what they're doing is the problem. So I try to focus less on the individual. And there are lots of bad apples, and I mean, it's across. I've had some bad apple teachers, I guess. But there's a lot of ways to think about that. But I don't want just nicer, gentler, kinder cops, right? To still arrest people who are primarily poor and undocumented black. Like that's not the goal. So I don't want cooler, nicer from the apples to do that. I'm trying to figure out what's going on in this orchard, right? What's going on in this society? How do we change that? And then because I'm a Christian, I just really follow the words of Jesus Christ. And we curses the entire tree because it bears bad fruit. He doesn't pick off just a bad apple and say, look at this entire tree. This is wrong. You're not doing your job as a good tree. And so we have a few bad apples. What's the source of those apples? Because apples don't turn bad on their own, right? There's something that's at the core, that's at the root that we have to get to. And so that's why I love Angela Davis's definition of radical, which is really to grasp the root of a problem. So radish, or radical comes from Latin. So it's either we take that logic to be true, it's dismissive of the systemic issues that create and produce that in the first place.
Awesome. And I think because so much of our audience does not know this, you're getting into the roots of the orchard, the apple tree, the institution, right? So you're what I hear you saying is that there's problems with the institution, regardless of the people in that institution, right? So what are the roots of the institution of police?
Yeah, right. Do y'all know?
Policing?
Can you raise your hand if you know the origins of police?
Students in my class know.
No, okay, 2 people, 3 people, 4, okay, alright. So this blew my mind because when I would hear some of this growing up, I was just like, wait, police come out of slave patrols. I was shocked. I'm like the same kind of cop, the same kind of woods my mom's. I'm like, slavery was such a long time ago. Like, what does slavery have to do with police? And And then when you think about how long ago slavery was, I could use my own family for an example. So my grandmother was born in 1936. Right? I grew up, my grandmother was basically like a parent to me, helped raise me. She was born in Arkansas and grew up in Memphis, and she came to St. Louis during the Great Migration. Her mother, my great-grandmother Rosie, was born in 1918. Right? This is someone who was an integral part of my life until I was in my mid-20s. Like my great-grandmother was born in 1918. Harriet Tubman died in 1913.
Right.
So like the person, probably the most popularly known abolitionist, died 5 years before my great-grandmother was born. 5 years. And my great-grandmother, her mom, Susie, she was alive when Harriet Tubman was alive. So the people, the last set of people who were enslaved through like what we take to be chattel slavery were dying in the 1930s and 40s. So my grandmother was alive as the last slave. Was taught by people, my grandmother was taught by people who had been formerly enslaved. So when you think about slavery through it is not that long ago. So I'm sometimes just surprised and shocked when I hear people try to push it into this memory. The issue is that slavery started long ago. Slavery started, in the 1300s with the arrival of the Spanish to the eastern shores of the United States and tried to settle down here. There was a mutiny on the ship, and Africans fought back and joined the indigenous people. So yeah, that happened in the 13 or 1400s, right? But yeah, let's say that was long ago. But it didn't end that long ago. The people who experienced it didn't die that long ago. Then, even after people who experienced slavery, who died in the 1930s, the Library of Congress was like, whoa, we should probably record these people's stories before they die. So there's huge slave narrative projects of recording the histories of people who were enslaved. And then after, they died, their children were, children of Jim Crow, right? They would experience segregation. The Voting Rights Act was passed the year my mother was born, right? My grandma was born 2 years before women had the right to vote. So this history, it's so recent. It's so recent. We can't just cast it off as a long time ago. And so the early formations of police come out of slave patrols in the Caribbean, I'm just pushing. I understand in the Caribbean. This game trying to enslave indigenous people in Cuba, even the word cop comes from a Spanish Latin word capere, to capture, right? To capture. And so this history of them trying to figure out, how do we have patrols and how do we have people who are responsible for going to catch and seize people, and how do we have people who are responsible for monitoring the plantations and the fields to stop uprisings. So they had different patrolling duties. And so, how do we get handcuffs? So you get handcuffs because people fight. You get shackles on their feet because people run away. You get the neck placements because you're trying to create distance from people so they won't, be able to plot and whisper and rebel. So as soon as slavery starts happening, we see within Europe a formation of surveillance, repression, incarceration to stop slave patrol, to stop slave revolts on the ships, like in Africa, on the ships, and in the Caribbean, and then in the West. Yeah. And so when South Carolina is developing the early police department in the 1600s, they're borrowing from Barbados. They're saying, this is how you patrol people, this is how you do raids. So when I say SWAT, for example, SWAT didn't happen because there were people with guns and selling drugs. The origins of SWAT comes from people banding together and doing raids, looking for weapons for people who were trying to overthrow slavery. These are the early raids in the West, right? Those kinds of raids to stop rebellions or plantations and enslavement. So that's one formation about slavery reform, particularly in the southern part of the United States. And we see that even with Louisiana. In the book I read about how during the Haitian Rebellion, there was a fear that rebellion would spread to other parts of the New World. And so people were trying to figure out how to keep Haitians and people from the Caribbean from coming to the U.S. So Louisiana starts passing laws saying, whoa, okay, French white people, y'all can come here, but don't bring your slaves because they're going to pass on how the rebellion happened. We don't want that to happen. So we're seeing the sharing of information and the knowledge of rebellion spread. And with that comes the sharing of oppression and tools of police. So that happens sort of in the southern part of the country. In the northern part of the country, right, we get the formation of policing through the suppression of labor. You know, people saying, I don't want to be exploited by these factories. I don't want to be exploited by these capitalists and railroads. I don't want to, we're going to fight to, have better working conditions. We're going to fight for better pay. And the police are being formed to stop the strikes, right, to repress the labor movement. And where is Boston learning how to do that? Well, Boston is learning how to do that from England, right? Where, again, we get another early form of police. And so again, the police in England, right, with the Bobbies, a long time ago, they weren't formed because it was crime. They were formed to colonize the Irish and to stop Irish people from rebelling against, Britain. And so wherever we see the formation and growth of police, what we see is the formation of capitalism, the formation of colonialism, and the formation of chattel slavery, right? And so all of these systems are merging together. And then again, you have the PR. It's like, well, we should keep these systems that become, municipal or national, depending on the country in which they were formed. And then you have people saying, well, let's just diversify them. Well, let's give them some body cameras. Let's make them gay. Let's make them black. Let's make them more. And it's like, well, no, we got to go back to those roots, right?
Yeah, that's really so.
I know it's a long history, but
I like it. So the roots of policing in the U.S. comes from slave patrols in the South and in the North, trying to control those who were rebelling, the labor movement and immigrants.
Yeah, and I'll say one more thing, and you don't just have to take my word for it. If you go to the Police Foundation website, if you go to the Police Museum's website, they say, hey, fun fact, police in the U.S. come from slave patrols. And so it's interesting how I sometimes talk about this history, how my people get offended and say, oh no, that's wrong. It's like, well, go read what the police say about that history. Go with it. But anyway, the police.
Yeah, so, the police have always, what we're saying is the institution developed as a way to control the underclasses of society, the less privileged.
Yes. Women too.
Yeah.
There's an incredible book by Aya Gruber called The Feminist War on Crime. And she gives an amazing history about the history of policing of white women, incarceration of white women that I didn't know. Now, I didn't know, especially in the southern parts of the United States. I mean, if you were married and you wanted to leave your husband because he was being abusive, you could be in prison. I mean, you could be killed, yes, you could be sent to jail. Who do you think was arresting people who wanted to get out of escape harmful situations, right? So, yes, I mean, all kinds of people absolutely.
Okay, so we've established that the institution, the roots of the institution has some problems, and it's not just a few bad apples that we need to do something about, that they're not just bad people, right? That the institution has problems, right? So, help us visualize what abolition of police in prisons might look like. Like if we were to start this process tomorrow, like what might that look like?
Well, I can say what people have been doing kind of for centuries. Like police reform isn't new.
Right.
You know, a lot of the, especially black people who were coming out of slavery, coming out of the Jim Crow era, they wanted to become police because they didn't like how they were being treated by racist police. So a lot of them tried to enter the police departments, reform the police department. In St. Louis and a lot of other cities, you will notice there's like two unions. There's like a police union, right? And then there's like a benevolent association. There's like an ethical society. There's like a more diverse police union. Because even still in 2022, you have police of color who are trying to reform the police, who get pushed back from the police. And so there's been a long history of police reform, right? A long history of people trying to say, well, how can we do this safer, more nicely, more effectively? So that's already going. And then alongside that, with abolition, one of the earliest prisons that were introduced in the U.S. were introduced by the Quakers, who created a system, who offered a system of penitentiary as an alternative to corporal punishment, or as an alternative to being exiled. Like, well, if you do something bad, we're gonna beat you in front of a lot of people in the public square, or we're gonna kill you, or we're gonna exile you. And Quaker was like, no, we should create a place where people can think about what they've done and become a reformed person. And as soon as prisons started to develop in the U.S., who were the people trying to abolish this in the 60s and 70s? It was the Quakers. They were like, no, this is bad. This is not going according to plan. I see the kinds of people you're locking up and putting in prisons. It's not actually the people who are doing the harm. Like, we have to stop this. And so there's been a long history of people trying to stop and slow down the expansion of the carceral state, trying to eliminate it, trying to abolish it. Not even in the U.S., but everywhere. And so when I think about the first steps, there's lots of different steps. I think about what Fred Moten and Stefano Harney says. They said, well, it's not just about removing police, and not just about removing prisons, but it's a deeper interrogation of how can we eliminate the kind of society that could around police in the first place. So that's like the broader North Star for me, which is like going back to, well, how do we stop homelessness instead of punishing homeless people or just creating more diverse people to lock up homeless people? Like, that's part of it. What's this broader thing? So that is what I try to use to help orient the group that I work with myself towards that. It's not an individual thing, and people have different ways and different commitments of how they're going to approach that problem. So when I think about the ways I see people doing it now, we try to say, well, total police and prison abolition is not going to happen in our lifetime. And this broader society that we want is also not going to happen in our lifetime, right? It may not happen, I have 2 kids, it may not happen in their lifetime either. What's before me right now is, okay, how do I have a commitment to reducing and eliminating carceral violence, capitalist-based violence, community violence, like right now? Right, so that's why I really appreciate when people say defund the police, because it's a critique of how much money gets spent on police, right? So, well, right now, I can be responsible for having to close jails. Like, that's something I can do right now. I can have suits to close jails. I can make sure that people who are currently incarcerated and they're trying to get help because they're suffering from conditions. That's something I and people I work with can raise awareness about the conditions that people are suffering from, try to alleviate them, try to close jails. Like, that is my contribution to this larger abolition struggle, right? What else can I do right now? I can sort of ask, well, why do people call the police? Why do people call 911? What's the question I was asking years and years ago? Why do people call 911? When you start looking at the data, you start seeing, well, less than 4% of calls to police right now, including places like New Orleans, less than 4% of those calls are like violent acts. They're like really like social communal acts that people are calling the police for because they don't know who else to call or what else to do. So how can we start developing responses for people to call someone else instead of calling the police? So organization on the work with King Division does that. They created an alternative to like 911 calls for people to call them. They opened up a free community clinic because people were calling because they were sick. And so it's like, how are we being responsive to the real community needs that we have right now? So those are some of the steps, like shrinking the carceral state, trying to stop the ability of new police academies, trying to say, well, when I talk to students, do you really want to be a police officer? Or was it that you actually, like, if you have all the opportunities, all the resources and support, what are the ways to make that possible? And sadly, you see this with the fight over student debt cancellation. Are y'all going to be graduating with student debt? Yeah, one person is home is going to have student debt? Just me and that person. Okay, 3 people. Everyone else is on a full ride scholarship. Or your parents pay for it. I mean, your parents pay for it, I feel it, but. So, 4 people. 5, thank you. So lots of people are going to be graduating college with student debt, and that's going to shape what kind of careers they go into. And it was so sad to hear, politicians say, well, if we cancel student debt, that people won't go to the military or won't go into these other professions to get their student debt paid for. And I was like, that's so sad that people have to risk being killed to get free education. And so fighting for things like free education, fighting for healthcare so people don't have to be, develop unhealthy dependencies or other kinds of so those broader policy fights that alleviate suffering, right, that make people less susceptible to being exploited, that matters a lot to me, especially around economics, right? Why is it that black women call 911 more than white women of the same age group? When you look at the data, you see that, when white women are in an abusive relationship with the male, with their partner, the husband, they tend to have childcare. So when they leave the relationship, they are dependent on their husband's income to make sure they have someone to watch their kids. So then they can go, they're freedom to go to school, they're freedom to get another job, they're freedom to move. Black women have less access to childcare. So then it's like, this person's harming me, but if I call the police, he's gonna go to jail, because jail's gonna lose his job, and we won't have to watch my kids. So this isn't because black women like police more, or want police more, or need police more, as the media says. This is an economic issue. So what if we have free childcare? How would that free up whether people who stay in relationships that are harmful because of children, right? So these sorts of things where a lot of them don't have anything to do with police or prisons directly, but actually the broader society that gives people more agency and more autonomy and actual freedom. Not just the freedom to do anything they want, but actual freedom and control over their lives. That's the society that I'm fighting for. And so I get excited when people are a part of lots of different struggles. We talked about climate justice earlier, environmental justice. We need environmental and climate justice activists. Because as the earth gets hotter, there's going to be more migration, more immigration, and the police and the military are going to be there to lock people up and keep them out of communities. We saw that with Hurricane Katrina, right? We see that with Syria, where there's more war when the planet's hotter. And so we need people to get into all kinds of fights, all kinds of struggles. And it doesn't have to be specifically towards the police, but just know that that has to be a part of the fight too.
So you mentioned this group you said you work with, Dream Defenders.
Yeah,
Dream Defenders, and they are based in New York?
No, Dream Defenders is based in Florida, but they're becoming a national organization.
So what do they do?
Everything. Dream Defenders is so cool. I had a crush on Dream Defenders in 2012 because I was so inspired by the level of organizing. Like, it was one of the groups that I saw that was like serious, who read together, was deeply multiracial, deeply diverse across class and gender, and they were trying to figure out how to become a revolutionary organization of our dreams. And I watched them grow and shift from 2012 to 2022 as a more interesting, more radical, multiracial, and diverse organization that is really committed to freedom fights. So Dream Defenders, they do mutual aid. And so when there's crisis, they make sure they have organized people around to respond to these crises. They do, like I said, that intervention work. They open up this free health clinic. They open up a freedom and justice and healing center that does street intervention work for violence, violence interruption work. They also do policy fights. And so they're engaged deeply in electoral politics. So they literally do so much because they know it's going to take so many different avenues of struggle for us to get the society that we deserve. And so I've been deeply impressed with what they've been able to do with their members. And now, thinking about what it's going to feel like to shift from a statewide organization based in Florida to a national organization with lots of people in Georgia.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's, man, so much to think about here. For students that feel the drive to want to get out there and make their life's work, working towards whether it's racial justice, criminal justice reform, environmental justice, and environmental activism, and all this stuff. What would you recommend to them now? And especially for students who are part of groups who are trying to build capacity here on campus. What can they do, right now, or get started?
Raise your hand if you're part of a student organization. Okay, all right, more hands went up this time than student day. That's interesting. Okay, kinda, you don't even know. You're like, I guess. I think what's cool and what I learned as a student organizer, I was involved in all the clubs, all the stuff on campus. The most important lesson that I learned is that students are not your only resource. Like, it can be very tempting to only look for other students and try to build, you know, what you're trying to fight for, your cause. And as a student, I would highly encourage you to really take advantage of the people who are who work in administrative offices, who are dining workers and janitorial, custodial staff. Like, that's so important. Like, these people have often been here longer than students and the faculty. They literally make the university work. Like, if the cafeteria closed, a lot of y'all wouldn't be able to eat. And so sometimes we can say, oh, I'm committed to racial justice, I'm committed to social justice, and not really, you know, or we'll walk past people who like are, you know, over other sides of that, even out on campus. So think about, you know, who is the broad, if you really map out who makes this university possible, are you really thinking about all the people, the technicians, like literally all the people who make that work? So that's important to me. The other thing I would say is to get off campus and get into the community. Now, I'll hear students say, you know, I'm working on this issue and nobody cares, Like, it's rarely true that you're the only person who cares about this, you know, about this thing. So find people on campus, off campus, and other institutions, or at least, you know, make people care in ways that are interesting, but not be shame. You know, when people come to me that are, you know, skeptical about abolition, I don't want anyone to feel bad. I don't want you to feel shame for not knowing or being skeptical. I know we have a very unfortunate, violent society. It doesn't have to be that way. I understand why it may sound scary, worried, maybe skeptical. I think skeptical is a good place to work from. So for people who are trying to build, you know, their base or trying to, you know, bring more people on board, I would say to keep talking to people who are skeptical, right? And don't expect to be an evangelist, to convert people to your cause, but to be honest, to like listen to hear them out, and to be in deep conversation community with them. You know, that's where I think those conversations run. That's why I think democracy happens, where we are able to willingly be engaged with people who we're skeptical with, and then say, yeah, okay, this is where we agree, this is where we depart. You know, but I hope for where we agree, we're joining this fight.
Yeah, I really like that answer, you know, because usually there's a canned answer, you just need to, you know, get out there, do the work and organize, but I really like the you know, notice who's here, right? And being able to bring them into the fold, or they address the issues, and then reaching out, not that it's broader than just maybe the, you know, students. You know, so thank you. Yeah. Well, I think this has been pretty fantastic. I've enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, wow. Okay, yes, I have. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you all for coming.